morning and evening, everyone. Welcome to this 53rd edition of the Indica Books Open House with Otis. The purpose of this open house is to invite anyone who's interested in improving or getting feedback on their craft of writing by submitting short pieces where Otis will review and send back his feedback. And then when we meet, typically on Sundays at 8 p.m. or 8:30 p.m. India time, he will cover those pieces, give us feedback, share his thoughts, and we invite anyone and everyone, as I said, to join in, irrespective of whether you have submitted a piece or not, though obviously we'd love it if you did submit a piece, but if you join, to hear, to see, and to take part in the feedback. The discussions typically are around the pieces submitted as well as some of the finer points of writing. And we welcome a spirited debate and engagement with Otis. And on that happy note, I will pass it on to you.
Okay, thanks. I'm having a little slowdown with my, maybe this is here. Sorry, my notability is having it's a little bit slow to catch up because I do my work on, anyway, so I have two pieces. There's a new anthology brewing, and I have two pieces from that, but I'm not certain that those authors know to join this session too for a conversation. I'm not sure what was communicated to them exactly, and I also don't see them here. So that means we truly have we truly have like a core group here of very, very astute writers. Ram, we have two pieces from you, so let's talk about them. Those are the two pieces that I have, unless these other two authors join us. So I don't know. Have we ever tried having everybody, put on their video and see everybody and have a kind of group? Rohini, I do not see enough. Honestly, she drops in every now and then, blesses us with her presence. Only infrequently, we might say.
I'm here now.
Hey, Ram, why don't we? Sorry, I don't know why my notability is not kicking in here.
Should I open what you sent to me? The feedback?
You can share that screen, you're saying?
Yeah, I could do that.
Sure, that sounds great. Let's do that.
Okay. I'll share my screen. Okay, let me do this a different way. When I share only a part of the screen, then the audio gets cut off. 1 minute. Yeah, 1 second.
Oh, there we are, all again. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Is this visible?
Yeah. So, is that?
This is the first sample that I sent.
Okay, so this is a little bit of the rewrite.
That's right.
Right. So you have the review of Aditi's book, and you have this.
Yeah.
So
shall I start with this?
Yeah, let's start with this, and then we'll talk about your review.
Great. Okay. So after last week's session, I realized that yes, there needs to be something where the reader can identify, should care for the protagonist. So why is it necessary for her to do those things for her son? I thought of a little bit of not exactly a backstory, but adding a little bit to the situation. And I added this first paragraph. I'll just read this first paragraph. The rest of the story remains the same. Shravani worked her hands furiously, slathering peanut butter on the slices of brown bread. She glanced at the framed picture of Shaker hanging on the wall above the refrigerator. She felt a lump in her throat. She saw the three coffee mugs next to a picture of herself, Shaker, and Adi on top of the refrigerator, all with the same message on them. Best daddy in the world. One for each of Shaker's birthdays from the time Adi was given pocket money until 10 months ago. Her birthday had come and gone 2 weeks ago. Cuckoo, cuckoo. Shravani turned and looked at the clock. 8:30 a.m. So the rest of the story is the same. I don't know if what I was trying to communicate is coming through. In this first paragraph, what I'm trying to communicate is that she is a single mother who's lost her husband recently. The son is obviously very fond of the father, and which essentially is shown by the fact that the son has gifted that best dad in the world mug for the father's birthday, but nothing for the mother. So she's trying to get his approval. She wants to do things so that her son will feel the same kind of affection that he felt for the father, and which is why she is trying to do things for him, take him to school on time, while at the same time juggling being a single mother and holding a job. So that's what I have tried to bring in as a little bit of a backstory here.
Okay. Yes, I perceive that, Ram. I perceive that you're bringing in this backstory element.
Right.
Um, so, so we're gonna have some straight talk about
Okay.
the 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 job of the mercenary hack writer. Okay,
Right.
um, so it's a little bit difficult. I mean, for me, like I've always been driven to write a story, based on I'm drawing. I wanted to tell the stories that I knew, and I was
Mhm.
passionate about doing it. And over the course of time, I was confronted with these ideas that, well, storytelling does work with some conventions. There's some devices, and it's basically like a kind of at this point, I sort of see it as a kind of manipulative psychology, right? It's sort of we know what words to put on the page,
Right.
basically, in order to evoke certain reactions. And the places where they've really wired this, of course, is Hollywood. Bollywood, I'm sure. I don't
Yeah,
watch a
they
lot of
do.
Bollywood, but I'm sure they have it absolutely wired too. I've seen the movies, the modern movies coming out of China. They've gotten it much more wired in China in terms of what they're doing, in terms of, I mean, everyone's learning from Hollywood basically. Hollywood is
Right.
they the writers and the money that they've had available there has drawn the drawn those writers, drawn their data analysis. I mean, they have audience analysis. They know the people sit in the audience and they go, oh, I feel scared. Oh, I feel good. I feel scared. And they track all that data. And basically, we're talking about manipulating the human brain,
Right.
making the reader feel something. One of the places where that started was this book that
Yeah.
I've put up before, Save the Cat. So it's a little bit complicated. So what you want is you want the audience to invest in the struggle of the character. That's the
Mhm.
external struggle. But you want them to have a sympathetic resonance with that character. It's a little bit complicated. Sympathetic resonance is different than pity.
Mm.
So, and and if we think about the save the cat idea, it's
Right.
basically an action. It's an action of character that shows the humanity of the character. What I've seen so often, because I have young kids and I've been forced to watch every Disney movie in the last 10 years. I I'm going to tell you something. I made a vow in my life never to use the word cute, and I never did until I had children. But then I was forced to use the word cute, and I've used it a lot since then. This is, we all become what we despise most, Ram.
I can see where that is going. Yes.
so, so, anyway, what I notice is they generally they start with a lot of male-centric heroes, okay? But there are definitely, they've developed a lot of, girl heroes lately on the sort of male-centric, with the same kind of male-centric storyline, right? They've dropped the sort of female-centric victimization line, and then basically created a kind of hero's journey, but with girls replacing them. Almost all Disney movies start with one of the parents dead. My girls and I joke about whether it's a dead mom story or a dead dad story. Sometimes it's a dead both parents story, right? So like the orphan, right? I mean, this is because it makes the child vulnerable right from the beginning. But it isn't the story, and it isn't what makes us sympathetic for the story. It's basically the context of the story. They're unprotected because what's going to end up happening to them is going to be bad, and there's no one there. And it's just simply we need an absence of that parental figure, basically, to allow these bad things to happen to the child. Cinderella, et cetera, et cetera. So what you have here a little bit is you are doing the backstory. But you see, the backstory in like a Disney movie is already the context. We don't really review. I mean, it's not something that we so pointedly review in a sense. And when you lean on it in the way you do, it's as if you're trying to evoke pity, and that's not exactly the emotion that we want to get to.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
sort of what I think. Like I just feel like it's sort of like
Okay.
For you, I see that you're going for it. And so I think that that's really good. And I would just say that it's really, so this is, the straight talk. It's in development.
Right.
You're trying to figure out what to do. You're
Yeah.
basically engaged in this mercenary task of like, how do I get people to care about the struggle of this woman if that's the person you want to get them to sort of adhere to. You want your audience to adhere to. So I see you working on that. And I think the basic issue is to keep working on it. And I think what's good about having this conversation is that working this part out is so incredibly important. I mean, this is the whole story is basically based on whether the reader is going to care about the struggle that the character is engaged in. So that's it. I mean, if we don't care, there's no story. If we don't care, no one watches it, no one reads it, no nothing. So actually spending our time thinking about this issue is important. What they do, of course, in Hollywood, I mean, this is the almost a joke of this, right? Save the cat. What they do in Hollywood is they've seen what works, and they just do it over and over again with slightly different forms. I mean, they basically repeat exactly the same beginning of every movie over and over again. I mean, just watch one. Watch the first 3 minutes of like the last, 100 movies to come out of Hollywood and probably Bollywood too, and you'll see that it's exactly replicated what they do because, basically, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Ezra Pound said, make it new. And what he means is you basically use the same story mechanism, which is a psychologically manipulative mechanism, and you change the details within it. And it's basically a new and improved story. And this is just cyclical. And you do that until you get, until you recycle the old stories. I mean, exactly. They're always being recycled.
Right. That's interesting. That's interesting because I know you hate James Bond movies, but in every James Bond movie, at the core of it, the theme is betrayal.
The theme is
father
what?
betrayal. Our daughter betrays the father betrays the daughter, or army general betrays his country. It's betrayal which is at the core of every story. At least the ones that I've seen in my generation.
And then, I mean, often it's betrayal and then some form of reprisal. That is certainly one story, basically revenge. I mean, revenge, reprisal is the same thing, but you know, we act as if it's basically a comeuppance, a kind of justice.
Yeah.
But it's revenge for being hurt.
That's interesting.
Betrayal works because the things that affect us, it seems to me, in my analysis, the things that affect us most are the severance of bonds that are very close. So when that's the, you know, people say what they want about money and, you know, food and flying around. The thing that matters to human beings is relationships. The thing that matters most to human beings in relationships are those that are closest to us in our kinship group, right? Our kinship group, as they say psychologically, is, you know, it's limited to about 12 people. It's small. When we sever those ties, the ties between fathers and daughters, mothers and sons, you know, these potent, you know, lovers, lovers a little bit less so than those parental relationships, right? But when we sever those bonds, that's the greatest sin. That's the greatest, you know, sin against the biological human being, because we depend on our kinship groups for survival. So yes, that's why they go to that. That's why betrayal is so effective, right? So anyway, I think in this story you're on the right track. You're basically you are engaged in the mercenary, you know, craft.
It was a mercenary hack. Yeah.
Yes,
it was a mercenary hack. I know that. Maybe I was a little bit lazy to do a little bit more work. You got it.
No, well, that's the thing. I mean, I told you my professor, who was, you know, a mentor to me, not an easygoing one. Okay.
Right.
You know, the hand severed at the wrist rather than write this paragraph. He also said in a workshop, he said, "Why is this story so bad?" I thought it was a real question. I thought we were supposed to like come up with an answer. No. He asked the question so that he might answer it himself, in fact.
Okay.
Anyway, he said that we have to know what a hack knows. And, you know, at that time, I was not a hack writer. I was a genius in my own mind, as they say. And I was like, oh, yeah, Abhinav.
So here's a question, Otis. You know, when books and writings say that head hopping is not a good thing, and show don't tell is not a show don't tell is what you should do and you should not tell. Those rules can be broken because they are not etched in stone, but one should know when to break them, so you know what those rules are, so you know when you're breaking them. Similarly with this, right, hack rules, I'm sure there will be cases where exceptions can be made, or they are totally okay, justified and all. How does one go about that? Or I mean, if I have to employ a hack rule in writing, how do I know, first of all, that this is a hack rule? And secondly, if I know that it's a hack rule, then what can I do to soften the blow, so to say, for the, for who's reading it?
Yeah, well, let me tell you, let's get to that in a second. But like the way I see the head hopping thing, so there are no real rules at all. It's what works. But the thing that we're trying to work with, which is the human being and the human mind and the human brain and the human heart, it's a fairly constant thing. And through centuries, right? Centuries of trial and error, essentially, with storytelling, right? We don't remember any of the stories that failed because they failed. We have, right? I mean, you have the tales of the Mahabharata, they've lasted because they're good. The other stories throughout the millennia that have lasted because they're good. None of the stories that were bad lasted. through trial and error, we've discovered basically how the human being works in regard to storytelling. And so that's really our basis. What works is our basis. It's not hack rules or not rules. It's not show, don't tell. It's that show, don't tell in general has been shown to work. The thing about head hopping, I'll just say this, like the way I see it is we have kind of a division, let's say in fiction, between things that are character oriented or character leaning and plot leaning. So, and the reader kind of comes at it a little bit differently. So the reader who wants to read about, you know, character development might read James Joyce's Ulysses, right? Plot oriented. But a character who wants to read about, you know, James Bond, they don't mind the head hopping. You know, it's expedient because it's really about the plotting more so than about the character. The character is pretty one-dimensional or maybe just slightly complex. The villain is just slightly complex, but it's an easy binary. And so we just want to be able to move from head to head because we want to cover the information. It's just easier. So that's how I see that split. It's not that one works and the other doesn't. It's that the base is going to be this human animal. The way that we avoid being thought of as a hack is that we do it well. We do it well. We have to do it. We have to do it seamlessly. We don't, you know, like, I mean, not to pick on you, Ram, but if we look at your first paragraph, we don't just, you know, have the woman at the sink and then glance at the photos that show that her husband is dead. We have to be a little bit more subtle than that, probably. You know, because Ram, it's like this. If you were shooting that as a movie, it would be like you would have the woman here, right? And she'd be doing the dishes, and then it's as if the camera went to the pictures. It said, you know, so long, Daddy, sorry you're dead. You know, and then went to this picture, so long, Dad, sorry you're dead again. And this picture is like, you've been dead a long time, Dad. So we feel horrible. And then went back to her, right? So because our instrument is a little bit different than the camera, but basically that sentence is a focal point.
Yeah.
Right? So you have this sentence, her washing dishes, this sentence, dead daddy, dead daddy, dead daddy. It's like being bludgeoned, right? With the need for us to be sympathetic. And then when I'm like, you know, and you know how it is, right? If your friend comes up to you and starts telling you all their terrible problems, what do? You kind of distance yourself. You're like, okay, well, let's go, you know, because we actually don't react that well to that situation. But in the movies, right? If we shot your scene in the movies, we would actually just have a wide pan, or like if they show Cinderella, right? When we start Cinderella, we don't have like, oh, she's lost her parents, you know, as being the first thing that we're being hit with. We just have her alone sweeping up the cinders in the fireplace, right? That's more subtle.
Mm.
So it's basically like so Cinderella, her parents are dead. And so it's understanding that context and now simply beginning the story, right? She's there just sweeping up the cinders because that is the context. We don't have to draw attention to the context. Mm. But I sort of want to repeat that the context, while the story does finally reveal something about the context and says something about the context, and it says something about overcoming the context. This is what Joseph Conrad says in Heart of Darkness. He says, the story is not a kernel, it's not like a nut that you crack in the center. The story is like the glow that brings out the haze of the world. I think that's correct. So even the story of Cinderella, what happens with Cinderella is finally a comment on the context of being alone and in a sense powerless in the world. I mean, I'm not saying it's a good rendition of that, but that's kind of what it gets to. So Ram, in your story, the thing is to understand the context. This is a woman alone raising her child, right? Fine, that's
Right.
great. But now you still have to get to what's the external struggle and what's the internal struggle.
Right.
Those things have not been accomplished because those are accomplished within the context. The context is just here. Husband's dead. She's on her own. She's got to raise the child. Maybe what city is she raising the child in?
This is Mumbai.
So raising the child in Mumbai, we understand that when she comes out, she has maybe some little bit of wealth left, but maybe she doesn't have that much. And we have people who are, poorer than she is that are making demands on her. There's a society that's asking her to care for them too. And she feels like she only has enough caring for her daughter. So that's the context, perhaps. Then what is her struggle externally? You have to think about that. And then, what's driving it, in the deepest possible sense.
Right.
So, yeah, in a way, when we say we got to know what a hack knows, well, okay, that's fine. We can read these books. This is a book
Right.
for hacks. This is a book for hacks. This is a book for hacks. Okay? This is a very good book for hacks. But what this author is talking about, this Robert McKee, if you don't know him, this guy truly is a hack, and the way he talks about it is like a hack. McKee, no, not exactly. What he ends up talking about, what we have to know about our character, what I'm asking you to seek out about your character and understanding her in context, that finally can't be hack work, right? Abhinav, you see what I'm saying? It's like we have to finally do the work to truly understand that character if you're writing a character that's a character piece. If you're doing something that's a little bit more hack work, that's more like the head hopping, plotting. That's not an emotional attachment. That's a plotting kind of strategic
Correct.
work.
Right.
And that's fine. It has its place and it's entertaining. That's great. So you're good at that. You do that. But if you're going to do something like this, Ram, what you're taking on right now, this, being within the point of, well, that's another thing. You don't really get into the point of view of this woman. So it's not really character. We're not really immersing ourselves in the character and the character struggle. We're still sort of just watching it from the outside. It's more like a slasher film. But if you do really go to the character, then you finally can't be a hack. I mean, now you're testing yourself as an emotional instrument, and that's what we end up having to do as writers. We have to be an emotional instrument. And then we put that on the page, and then the reader gets to have, basically, they get to have the emotion through the avatar of the instrument that we've created. And that is not easy to do. I mean, that's a life's work, basically. That's trying to create, and that's trying to find and then recreate humanity on the page. Abhinav, did that answer your question a little bit?
It did. And I guess I'll know more as I submit some of my pieces, as well as I see some of the pieces that are submitted and discussed here.
The way I think of it is things like show don't tell, and even like no head hopping, and those things that we call rules. Those are what I think of as I think of them. They're just shortcuts, right? They're just shortcuts to get to the thing that we actually have to get to, which is really being able to both understand the world around us so that we can put characters onto the page and understand what's necessary to write in order to really bridge with our art, make a bridge to our audience.
Yeah.
I mean, but show don't tell is like, you don't need to know anything about your audience, about humanity, about the human animal. You don't need to know any of that to kind of just, type show don't tell. And that's why it's a shortcut. It doesn't mean you're doing it well, but it means that you're doing it and you're probably on your way. Like the thing that, for me in my work, probably the thing that I latched onto earliest was the idea of point of view. And so, I mean, it's just, you could latch onto show don't tell, you could latch onto no head hopping, you could latch onto don't write any cliches, you could you could latch onto a number of different sort of rules. And I do feel that if you struggle with them long enough, cliches is a great one. Don't ever write any cliches. Don't ever write any stereotypes. That will help you. That will test you. But if we do those things, just like any art, it will start to bring us towards a place of, I mean, we're never a master, we're always a novice. It's sort of like we're a craftsperson. If we're a craftsperson and we're making a wheel.
I'm sorry, I just have to come back in a minute. There's somebody at the door. Give me a minute.
Okay.
Please continue.
So it's like as storytellers, we're just like crafts people, right? If we're making a wheel or we're making a chair, the first thing the person makes a chair is they're like, well, you need 4 legs. So we get 4 legs on it. It doesn't mean we've made a great chair.
Right.
Ashwani, what do you think?
I'm sorry.
Let me pick on Ashwani for a second. So what Ashwani is so good at is that he brings us so absolutely convincingly into his world. I mean, it's the language. It's, Ashwani, you just have this, you just drop us into it. It's a complete, it's a complete experience. I don't read I read the first sentence and I'm already there. There's no, and that's really a powerful thing to be able to do. Rohini, what she does is she writes these powerful women characters that I know that she knows. I don't know, Rohini, I don't know what kind of warrior you were, but I know you were a warrior. And it's like, there's no space. She's not inventing those characters. They just appear on the page. The other characters can seem a little bit weaker. Rohini maybe doesn't know those characters as well, right? But these powerful female warriors, she just puts on the page like nobody's business. And I'm advised not to mess with you. So when we meet, I mean, like, I'm able to do all this online, but if it were in person, I'd be like, ah.
No, that's a good point. I should work on the other characters more.
Well, it's very hard. It's hard because then you actually have to expand, your sense of your own complexity. Because what we do with the characters is also a reflection of what we've done with ourselves. You understand yourself as this, let's say this powerful, warrior, and you understand the parameters of that. And I kind of understand the parameters of that too. But now we do have to expand because every character has to be full. And it doesn't matter if they're a minor character or a major character. It doesn't matter if they just walk on as a bit part. There's no bit parts. We have to really be able to know and understand all of those characters. That requires us, the way we do that is a little bit from observation, but not really. The way we do it is we turn the light inward and we realize that we have all of these facets within us. That they asked Flaubert, what is it? Is it Emma Bovary? What is that book called? Is it called Emma Bovary? No. What is that book called with Emma Bovary? But anyway, Flaubert. So they said, who is Flaubert? So who is Emma? They asked, who is Emma? This woman who commits adultery, and we're totally in her point of view. And Flaubert said, Emma, c'est moi, right? She's me. They asked Tolstoy the same question about his characters. Where do these characters come from? They're me. Walt Whitman says, I contain multitudes. He's right. Because we're all finally the same, human being at our core. So we can discover the world by discovering ourselves. I mean, you know this well enough in your own philosophy to stare at the lotus blossom, right? Staring at the lotus blossom is staring at yourself. So, but yes, Rohini, that is a great thing to work on developing. I mean, I've worked on, that's a life's work, to try and understand other people other than yourself. But it's possible.
Tough. It's tough. Developing all the characters in a novel is tough.
Yeah. Well, and the first step to doing that is to be open, and to be open to those characters is to be without judgment.
Yeah. Right.
And without judgment, then we're like a little ship on the ocean. We're not tethered to the shore anymore, are we? So,
yeah.
Without our tether of judgment, keeping us safely, attached to the mainland. Okay, Ram, let's talk about your other piece. But anyway, good start on this. I see you, trying to do the right things, and then you're going to dig, and it's going to push you. So that's great.
Let me share my screen again. All right. Yeah. So this is the book review that I had written. Which part do you want me to scroll to?
Why don't you read? So this is Aditi's book.
Yeah.
And why don't you read the first page for us, and then we can start talking about it.
All right.
I do hope I hope everyone will pick this up and get a review on it. And you're reminding me, Aditi sent me a copy. So actually, your review, even though I'm going to have comments about it, and because I have the book, is driving me to read it. I don't have time to do a lot of outside reading, but I will. I'm definitely going to pick it up because.
Okay.
Anyway, go ahead. Read the first page, please.
Right. Hindu Love Stories is a collection of short stories selected from the Hindu epics, Puranas, and scriptures. That the title of the collection is Hindu Love Stories is significant. The author makes a bold statement by not using such neutral-sounding terms as Puranic, Ancient, Indian, etc. This assertion lends integrity and directness to the narratives in the book. It also sets the stage to delve into Hindu philosophical concepts, at the peak of which are the 4 Purusharthas, the primary aims of human life. Dharma, righteous action; artha, wealth or that which is deserving of being earned; kama, fulfillment of desires; and moksha, liberation. For in India, prema or love has been rooted in dharma, is a means to gain artha and fulfill kama, leading to the attainment of moksha. In Hindu thought, love does not mean physical love or lust, something that is wrongly attributed as kama, nor does it mean the romantic pink candy floss romance. Love, be it worldly or for the divine, has dharma at its base and ultimately leads to moksha, liberation. Love that is rooted only in pandering to the senses is of a base nature, and the scriptures warn against getting sucked into this. Hindu thought even gave equal importance to the feelings of man and woman in this dharmic love. Indeed, the Sanskrit word for sexual intercourse is sambhoga, which means to enjoy together or enjoy equally. It can even be taken to mean to become one in enjoyment. Clearly, this indicates thought and deed of a higher order rather than the basal satisfaction of the senses.
Okay, great. I circled that clearly. I say clearly as a warning word for me. It's just like when if someone says truthfully, you're pretty much like truthfully, clearly. Yeah. It's like clearly is usually a word that you put at the front of a sentence that is not very clear. Truthfully tends to be a word you put at the beginning of a sentence that's not going to be truthful. As my kids joke with me, Dad, no offense, but I'm going to offend you right now.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, it is. It's a
It's like a
ridiculous word.
Freudian. I think they call that a Freudian preamble. It's like
Yeah. Now that you put it that way, when I read that sentence, that word is making me angry.
Well, don't be angry. Just get even. That's what I say.
Right.
Okay. So you Rohini, Ashvani, Abhinav, Sri Charan, Nivedita. We've heard the beginning of this. So if this was a review, what would be your feeling about it?
I don't think I got a sense of the book as yet. That will probably come later.
Yeah, we don't have later. We gotta. That's basically what I think, Ram. Is that
Okay.
This seems right now to be a little bit almost like an academic. Like you want to do something academic with the book.
Right.
You know, when I was in the PhD, I had to write academic things about books, and I would develop my ideas. Then I would go into the book, and then I would get back to my ideas. And really, they were about my ideas because that's what I was supposed to do. I hated that work. That was like PhDs in English are murderers of literature. This is what I think.
Yes.
So I was forced to do that work. I was forced to matricide and patricide, basically, of those I loved. And
very true.
yeah. I really want you to get into the book because what you're trying to do in a review is you're trying to basically decide whether you want to encourage people to read the book or not read the book. So, and it's not exactly true. So there is a little bit of this doing a review very well. There's certainly reviewers who basically, they carve out their own place because of the way they do the review. So if you read the New York Times book review, which, I really don't very much, but you can see that the reviewers there are building their own reputations in terms of their own intelligence, in terms of the way that they're reading and developing and showing and discussing these books. And through that, they're engaged in a kind of criticism that's also leading literature in its way. But by God, who wants to be a critic, right? This is not an aspiration, for us. I don't think. But I would say I would try and get into the book. I would try and as a format, I would see it like this. So this is very typical of writing essays. Is that we want to have we want to say something in the beginning to sort of intro the work, but then we want to get to the actual language of the book very quickly. We want to quote the book probably. We want to maybe take one or two stories and delve into them in what we would call a qualitative way. Right? So we'd have a qualitative discussion of two of the stories. And we don't want it to be academic because we're not trying to attract readers who are academic readers.
True.
Most people aren't. You know how many people read academic works? Like 4 people whose careers depend on reading it. That's the only reason they're reading it. Because of their own career. So it's for money. We want to get readers who want to go into a world. That's the main thing. Go into a world that's new, go into a world that's revealing, escape their reality and be able to inhabit something, more exciting and more beautiful and all of that. So you want to have maybe look at 2 works in a qualitative way, and then you want to be quantitative, right? And the quantitative, typically in reviews, you'd have something like, The stories now you do your more general talk. The stories, treat women who da 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 da, and not, it's not the stereotypical. I'm interested in all of that, Ram. The way this book maybe confronts some stereotypes. I think that that's an interesting thing to talk about, but probably I would talk about it after you got the hook into the reader.
Right.
Right. And when we talk about the quantitative, it's very common to say not all of the stories are equal because we want to look like we're balanced. We don't want to look like we're sycophants. So we say not all of the stories are equal. Some of the characters seem not treated as thoroughly, but then we put that aside. That's our little straw man argument. And
Right.
then we come back in support of the book in total. And then we say something that's, definitely directing at the end. But the way to think about a review is going to be about 2 pages. Same thing with a news article. Most people, this is the thing, most people in this kind of reading are never going to read to the end.
True.
So you
That is
make
true.
sure that you do your work in the beginning. You should do your work in the title. You should do your work in the first sentence. Do your work in the first paragraph. I mean, you're losing, let's say you're going to get 1,000 eyes onto this piece.
Right.
1,000 eyes are going to open this piece. Only 500 are going to read the title, right? Only 100 are going to read the first sentence. Only 50 are going to read through the first paragraph. It's diminishing
Very true.
returns all the way down.
It's very true. Yeah.
So, but you can do something very good in your review if you give like that first sentence to, in this case, Aditi, right? She's the writer, not you. You're the critic. You're the reviewer.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
Aditi, like you write a little bit about her preamble. That's fine. Talk about that at the end, right? But let's get into one of these stories. You know how I talk about a story should grip you by the throat and not let go?
Right.
Let's get that. Get that into first. She's already doing that work. So you find it and you pick it out. You pick out the best one. And you grip the reader. And you're like, when a writer writes a sentence like that, you are not going to put the book down.
True.
I was drawn in from moment one. And then go back to her again and again and again. Quote her. Don't be well, you're not going to be a spoiler in these stories. People know how they go, basically. Sure. So, but you're not going to tell the story. You want to highlight the writing and the vision of the writer. And you do something really great for the book if you actually end up taking, you don't just treat the book, you end up treating the writer. And
Right.
And I think that's something that, I've read a lot of Aditi's work, and I've always been pretty blown away by her writing. So I would really highlight that.
Right. Can I just share something?
Yeah.
I want to share my screen. So this is a review of a book written by a 10-year-old child, and I think he does a stellar job. So this is the one-page book review he wrote. I hope everybody can see that.
Nice.
So he's telling us what the title of the book is, who is the author, what is the central idea, who are the characters, why he liked the stories, and why he wants others to read the stories.
Yeah. I think that's not a bad model, but I would also try and get you to get some of Aditi's language on the page.
Sure.
Yeah, and I hope everyone will review that book too.
Yes, I think they should. It's a very good book.
I think you have an interesting look around for that more academic style discussion. That's another kind of paper. It's going to be read by 4
Sure.
people. but I think it's interesting, and I know you think it's interesting. I know you like delving into those ideas. I do too.
Right.
I do write that stuff, and I like thinking, and I like to think that it does some good in my life. So do write that article, and then also write this review that's really highlights the book and that writing
Sure.
and that you know Aditi's she has this great vision, and
Yeah.
get that on the page.
Sure. I'll do that.
And we did not have the other two, I don't think, that submitted from the beginning of the anthology. So I think
Oh,
that's going to wrap.
okay. Do you want to reply or drop Ratul an email letting him know that perhaps the two authors who sent their pieces, or the ones who will send their pieces who are part of the anthology, perhaps they have not understood or got the full gist that it's not just submitting the piece, they should also come on board and take part in this session.
Yeah, can I kick that back to you, Abhinav, because I actually don't have his email.
Oh, okay. I'll drop an email. I'll connect you and Ratul so that, yeah. And thank you everyone for joining, and do send in your pieces.